Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new episode of Today's Youth. And today we will be talking about mental illness and its repercussions. We will be focusing on this in addition to some other points with our guest here at the studio. Aya Magdi, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Aya, you are a graduate of mass communication. Tell me, why did you choose mass communication in specific?
It's actually a funny story. The subjects that I took in IGCSE only allowed me to go into mass communication. So I went into it a little bit sad, a little bit, this isn't what I want to do. But I discovered my love for it. I discovered that I can reach such a wide audience with all of the tools that we have today disposed. You really can just broadcast yourself. You can, any message that you'd like people to hear, you can go out and say it. And I absolutely adore mass communication. I miss being in a studio so much, honestly.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, tell me, what are your aspirations through your studies, studying mass communication? What are your goals for the future?
Well, I specialized in radio and television out of a bunch of other specialties, which were cinematography as well as marketing.
Yeah.
Radio and television, I think the most important part of it was that it really helped me rediscover my self-confidence. There's this sort of magic that you get when you're standing in front of the camera and the lights are all on you. It's really wonderful. And it makes you feel strong and confident and that you can really reach an audience and make a difference. So that was my specialization. And as for my goals and aspirations, I've said this so many times and I'll say it again. The most important thing for me, the thing I want to do the most is to just, whatever topic that I am discussing, I just want people to feel like they're not alone in what they're going through, that you know, someone is going through the exact same thing that you are, that things aren't so hard, that there is help, there's support, there's so many people out there that are willing to help you and be with you and listen to you. And I think that's something that we really need in our current time, I think, because of the COVID pandemic, because of just feeling lonely, feeling sad, feeling helpless.
Yeah.
I think it really makes a difference when you know that there's somebody there with you.
Right. Since you studied mass communication and you focused on radio and television, so tell me, how do you see radio and television and all the traditional media sources, media outlets, in comparison or vis-a-vis the social media?
Right. Okay. So all of us use social media. It's become an integral part of our lives. It's become a part of everything, our society, politics, health, music, everything is social media these days. And but I think it's also important to know that when you need a break from social media, you should take it. Being on your screen for too long isn't good. Reading news every single day is also not good for you, especially with all the unrest that's going on in the world these days. So it's important to know when to take a break. Both are not really comparable. We live in a digital age right now. My father used to literally write books with his handwriting on pieces of paper. So we've come so far from then. That's it, really.
Right. You've done a lot of research in the field of mental illness.
Of course.
And that was part of your work during your university years.
Yes.
Tell me more about those research and how do you see throughout or out of this the importance of knowing more about mental illness and its repercussions, especially when dealing with our kids, with teenagers?
Of course. Okay, so we all live in a society that does not really like to go too deep into the topic of mental health in general. And that has so many repercussions, not only for ourselves, but for our loved ones and for those around us. There is so much that we can do to help those that we love, and the first thing that we can do is to simply educate ourselves. You can go online and you can read all you need to know about mental illness, and it's really, really important not to view it as a taboo topic or as a topic that is shameful or unnatural or anything like that. It's a normal thing. We all go through it. We all go through depressive phases. We all have certain traits of certain illnesses. It's nothing to be ashamed of, but unfortunately the society that we live in tends to shame it a little bit. So we really need to get past the stigma of talking about just feeling bad or talking about illnesses or disorders and things like that.
How do you see Egyptian mental health professionals? Are they portrayed as, for example, unhelpful?
It really does depend on who you ask. If you ask someone who has a positive experience with a mental health professional, they will rave about it, and that is me, actually. But I also know people that have had very negative experiences, and unfortunately, that has traumatized them and has made them unwilling to seek help, which is also something really important that we need to discuss. As for Egyptian professionals, I obviously cannot speak for the entirety of them. But there is quite a wide range, and we have now apps like, am I allowed to say app names? Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
We have apps like that show you, okay, we have apps right now that show you doctors, the kind of colleges that they studied at, the certifications they have, and the most important thing, reviews from other patients. So all of that is really helpful. We didn't have anything like that in the past, and that is also a really, really important aspect of social media and how it actually aids in diagnosing and treating people who are scared to seek help or who are scared to even like tell their parents or their families that I want to go to a shrink, I want to go to a therapist. They can simply go online and find the help that they can get. And there are prices ranging, of course. There are expensive ones, there are cheap ones, but whatever the, how do I put this? Right.
In relation to this, or in line with this, some people would need therapy, but they cannot afford. I mean, like students, like workers, like what's the way out for them?
This actually is quite a problem. A lot, and I mean a lot, of the people that I have personally spoken to, as well as from research that I've done, shy away from therapy because it is expensive. And this isn't just an issue here, it's an issue worldwide. Yes. I think even here it's a lot more affordable than it is in other countries. Exactly. Yeah. Because healthcare overseas is quite expensive. Sure. Some people literally go bankrupt just trying to pay their medical bills. So we have this wonderful opportunity here that we have a range of therapists from cheap ones to expensive ones. So that's a good thing in our country, and I fully support anybody who wants to go, who wants to invest in it, because you're investing in yourself, you're investing in your own mental health and your own happiness and your own well-being, which is the most important investment there is.
Okay, also some people are scared of taking medications because of the expenses, as you said, or because of the fear of addiction.
Of course.
So what's the way out?
Of course. Well, this is also a very common issue here in Egypt especially. And I think that problem stems from our lack of awareness and our lack of studying on what medications really are. When you go to a therapist and you get diagnosed, one of two things will happen. Number one, your state will not require medication, or your state will require a course of medication, which usually takes around 6 months. So that's not really a long-term thing. It's not, however, the problem is that some people tend to, they will go to therapy for a while and then they'll stop going, but they'll continue taking their medication. So you'll go through a loop of taking meds that have been prescribed to you a very long time ago with a particular dose. And that is where the addiction thing comes in. What we need to do to get over this is to just keep up with our therapy appointments and see the right doctors and adjust our course of medication. It's really important to understand that when you go on medication for a disorder, whatever it is, taking an antibiotic, it's the exact same thing.
Also, some people do not believe that medication is effective in cases of some psychological issues that they have. So how can you convince those people of the importance of seeking a therapy or taking medications?
Certainly. Well, when it comes to medications, there is ton of research made that you personally can read online on how psychological medications work. And an example of that, I think this is the example that most people use, is postpartum depression, which is a depression that comes to mothers after giving birth. Now,
Yes.
Mothers who have postpartum depression, they most often cannot go through it without the help of antidepressants. And unfortunately, what is done is that people will tell the mother, you can get through this on your own, it's going to be fine, this is normal. But that's not what they need. When you have depression, you have an illness in your brain. You've got a chemical imbalance that needs to be treated with medication. So it's really important to stop saying things like, you can get through this with the power of sheer will. It's not true. If you have a disease, then you need help and you need meds for it. So that's one thing. The problem with medication also, another problem, I think, is that there's so much stigma around it. When you simply hear the word medication, you're a little scared and you're a little anxious because all you hear...
medication for mental illness in specific.
Exactly, yeah. You hear about all these scary stories, but you never ask about the successful stories of people who got through their illnesses using medications, how it saved their lives and how it continues to save their life. So there's really good and bad in everything. So instead of only highlighting the negatives, we should choose to highlight the positives as well. And we should choose to talk to people with success stories, people who have gotten better through medication, people who have gone from catastrophic events, who have resolve their trauma and become better people through medication. So why do we only focus on the bad? Why don't we also choose to portray the good? You know?
Also, some people has the mindset that they can help themselves get over the situation or their psychological depression or so. Do you think people can actually do so through getting engaged in some classes like yoga classes, for example, or some sports or dancing classes, for example?
Certainly. Basically, when you are sick and you have a cold, do you only take medication or do you also rest? Do you stay in bed? Do you drink orange juice, take cough drops, all those things?
Sure.
You take the medication that you're supposed to take and you do other things to help alleviate your mood. So as we all know, physical exercise releases endorphins in your body that makes you feel good. And that is why almost all therapists recommend physical exercise when it comes to treating depression or anxiety. I have personally found it to be very, very important when it comes to feeling better. Physical exercise can be, as you said, yoga, dance, even if you're just in your room dancing in front of your mirror, those things really, really make a difference. So we should choose to apply both in order to feel the best way.
Do you think that we have a lack of representations of such issues in the media?
Of course we do. We definitely do. And I think that is also part of the stigma that we're facing today, is because how many movies can you name off the top of your head that discuss mental illness, right?
Yeah.
Quite little. However, that has changed in recent years, which is something to be really proud of. Especially Egyptian media. I'm sure everyone has seen the series Khali Balak Min Zizi,
Yes.
which stars Amina Khalil, one of my favorite actresses.
Yes.
This series portrays an ADHD patient who goes to therapy, and it portrays therapy in a positive light. And I've seen people watch that show and say, wow, maybe I should start going, which is so essential and so important when it comes to defeating the stigma around mental illness and feeling better and reaching out to our loved ones. So I think that, yes, we do have a lack of representation, but we're building towards more of it, which is incredible. I think it's a really important step.
So how far do you think the media, the television, the movies should be representing different cases of mental illness? How would this help, I mean?
How would it help? Okay, well, let's say that you're feeling depressed or anxious or any other negative feeling. When you are watching someone go through the same thing that you're going through, you will automatically feel better. You will feel less alone, and it should be noted that one of the most important causes of depression is that people feel alone. They feel like they're only going through something themselves. They don't know that millions of other people around the world are going through the exact same thing that they go through.
Yes.
So when we represent mental illness in the media, we are telling people it's okay to not be okay. We're telling them you're not alone. We're telling them that there's hope, which is crucial when it comes to getting better and being treated.
Right. Well, I think also there is not enough awareness on the difference between mental illness and personality disorders.
Very true. That is very true. Okay, let's talk about that. So mental illness, a very popular example is depression or anxiety. But a personality disorder is something like borderline personality disorder or bipolar disorder. The difference between these is that mental illness is acquired. What does this mean? It means that depression can be caused by the death of a loved one.
Circumstances that you pass through.
The death
loss
of a loved
dear
one.
person or so.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But a personality disorder is something that you are born with. It has to do with genetics. It is almost always inherited. It has to do with environmental factors that a person experiences through during childhood, excuse me. So those things are very different. When it comes to a mental illness, obviously in both cases, you should go to a therapy. If you suspect that you have either of these, you should go get treated. You should go get diagnosed. And it should be important to note that when you first go to a mental health professional, you might need a few sessions to be properly diagnosed, which is really good because a lot of people, not a lot of people, but in some cases, people do get misdiagnosed and they will also then take medication that is not right for them, which leads to even more trouble. When it comes to personality disorders do not go away with time. They are treated. You learn to live with them. You learn to alter your own behavior and be aware of the behavior that your disorder gives you. But when it comes to anxiety or depression, they can go away quite easily when it's caused by, like we said, the death of a loved one, or anxiety caused by exams or stress. They're quite different. So you need to find your proper diagnosis. Do not try to self-diagnose. Do not go online and Google your symptoms and automatically choose the first thing that pops up. It's really important to have the help of a mental health professional when it comes to
So
this.
in both cases, in a mental disorder and personality disorder, you both cases need a therapist and you need to take medications. Which is easier to cope with? I mean, which one of them can you help yourself out with?
Okay, well, first of all, you actually don't know if you need medication or not by yourself. When you go to a doctor, the doctor decides whether or not your case needs to go on medication. And sometimes they will just need something called behavioral therapy, which is just to talk to somebody and let out all those emotions inside you. You can get advice from your doctor. Some cases require medications like antidepressants or anxiolytics. Cases like postpartum depression almost always require antidepressants. And sometimes with stress from exams or acute stress, which is just anxiety that is caused by circumstances going in your life, you might not need meds. You might just need to meditate or exercise, simple things like that. So it really, the whole importance of going to a doctor is that only they can decide whether or not you are going to need a course of medication. That's the most important thing. We must always stay away from self-diagnosing or taking meds on our own. It's really important to get the proper prescription.
Right. We always hear about bipolar personality disorder. It's really widespread. Would you tell our viewers more about it and how is it diagnosed? What's the way out of it, for it?
Certainly. Okay. Bipolar disorder is a very widespread thing. Bipolar disorder is characterized by two main moods, something called depressive and something called manic. So the doctor, through the talk with their patient, through the conversations they have, they will ask questions like, how did you react in this X and Y situation? Through the patient's answer, they will decide whether or not they have this disorder or not. But it's not just one question, obviously. It's a bunch of, doctors do their thing, their doctor thing. When it comes to bipolar, it is very widespread, but it's nothing to be ashamed of. A lot of people have it, and it's really important to know that all the people who get diagnosed and treated for it, they lead completely normal lives. They have very healthy social lives. They have very healthy relationships with people. They live normal lives just like all of us.
But they have extremes, right?
They do have extremes.
Mood swings.
Exactly.
Right? So if you meet them in the morning, they might be very happy and flamboyant, and you meet the same person in the evening, you find a totally depressed person, right?
It is not that extreme. It's not like a day thing, but it does depend on the patient's case. If they are not being treated by a professional, they will suffer from extreme mood swings like that. But if they are medicating and if they are being treated, you won't even be able to tell that this person has a disorder. And it's really important because bipolar and other disorders in general, they don't only affect your relationships with people. They can affect every single aspect of your life. They can affect your academic life. You can feel lazy. You can fail your exams. You can fail an entire year because you just can't. You're tired. You feel exhausted, They affect your relationship with your family. They affect your physical health. Really, really important to know that a lot of mental illnesses, unfortunately, do affect our physical health. And I'm sure that everybody knows about this already.
On the long term.
Of course, right.
How can lack of diagnosis and treatment lead to serious repercussions?
Lack of diagnosis and treatment. Wow. Okay. So as we mentioned before, it's really important to, if you suspect that you might have something, and even if you don't suspect that you might have something, if you're feeling a little bit blue, or if you're feeling mentally exhausted, you just really can't, you don't feel the same way as you used to. You don't feel like your normal self. You must reach out. You have to reach out, even if it is to a loved one. If it is to a loved one at first, and then you can go to a mental health professional. But it's really important to just not keep it inside you and bottle it up. So when it comes to a lack of diagnosis, what happens when we're living with a disease that we don't even know the name of? I went through quite a few years having a disorder called borderline disorder. I was undiagnosed and therefore untreated. And honestly, my life was kind of falling apart. The difference before and after I was diagnosed and went on treatment is not comparable. It's a completely different quality of life. There's no way I would be able to sit here in this chair and talk to you and share my experience with you if I hadn't gone through therapy, if I hadn't been treated, if I hadn't been diagnosed, if I hadn't educated myself on what I have, if I hadn't taken that step and went to a doctor, I would still be the same person that I was back then, that little girl in her shell, But it's because of my diagnosis, and it's because of the fact that I got treated is why I can be here today in front of you talking to you about all of this. So that's really what it is. It's quality of life. It's whether or not you want to invest in yourself, It's really important to just, let's let go of, this is going to cost me too much money, or the place is too far away, or this doctor is whatever. If you don't find a good doctor, go to another doctor, and so on and so forth. And it's really also very important to know that you might not always get along with your therapist. Some people have chemistry, some people just don't. So don't lose hope if you go with a doctor that you do not like. go to the second session, go to the third. If you still don't like them, go find another doctor, but don't give up. The most important thing is that we have to persevere and keep on going.
Right, going back to you and your experiences, you also had an experience with the Model United Nations
Yes.
Human Rights Division.
Yeah.
Tell me more about this experience.
The Model United Nations in my university taught me so much. You would sit in a makeshift council and you would have your own country and you would, I think everybody knows how the MUN usually goes. The most important thing it taught me was raising awareness. As human beings, we tend to not want to hear negative things. We tend to only want to see positive things. And that is why a lot of us are unaware and uneducated about all the troubles that are going through the world. And that's really, we all have to be socially aware. We have to do everything that we can to give back to all the people who are suffering. And that is what the MUN taught me, Human Rights Division, of course.
Yeah.
It's really, really important. And it's just part of being humane, you know? It's human nature. We need to help each other. We need to all stick together. We need to do what we can to help people who are less fortunate than us. That's the most important thing.
Right. Well, talking about youth and, of course, youth empowerment and how can youth help their countries through the phase, especially here in Egypt, as we're going through a phase of development. So what's expected from the youth towards their countries?
As youth, we need to just do what we can, whether you're a student or whether you're a graduate. Of course, you have a commitment to your country, the beautiful place that you live in, that has given you education and whatnot. We need to do the best that we can. We need to start spreading awareness on the most important issues, because now, as we discussed earlier, we've got social media, which is a huge tool in getting our voices out there. We need to start volunteering to make our country better. There are so many campaigns, so many things that you can do to just help out, whether it be environmental, when it comes to feeding poor people, or even giving away your clothes to organizations. Those things all seem so simple and so little, but they make a huge difference in the long run towards making our country a better place.
Right. What's a message that you would like to deliver to the youth from your place here?
A message I would like to deliver to everyone is that no matter how bad you feel, no matter how hopeless things seem, things get better, and that you're not alone, and that you should not be ashamed of how you're feeling. It's okay to not be okay, and you shouldn't feel bad about feeling bad. Reach out. So many people are going through what you're going through. Do not lose hope. And I would absolutely, nothing makes me happier than helping someone who's going through something awful and seeing them get better is the most amazing joy that I could possibly go through.
Right. Well, I would like to thank you very much.
Thank you.
Magdi. Thank you very much for joining us, and all the best of luck.
It's been an honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Dear viewers, that brings us to the end of this edition of Today's Youth. Many thanks for watching, and don't forget to join us next week, same time. Till then, it's goodbye.